He looks back on his life and remembers the moments he wished had never happened. The mistakes, the failures, the choices that led to pain, regret, and shame. And yet, when he studies them closely, a disturbing truth begins to emerge. Without those very mistakes, he would never have grown. Without the falls, he would never have learned to stand. Without the wounds, he would never have understood healing. This is the paradox hidden at the heart of human existence. We spend our lives running from error, terrified of failure, desperate to remain unbroken. But it is precisely in the breaking that something larger enters. It is only when a structure cracks that the light can seep through. He begins to see that mistakes are not accidents. They are not interruptions to the path. They are the path. Each wrong turn, each misstep, each collapse, all of them are the secret teachers that life assigns without permission. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. The person he is today did not come from the times he succeeded. Not from the applause, not from the moments of being right. The person he has become was carved out of failure. It was shaped by the sharp edges of regret. It was sculpted by the weight of imperfection. He realizes now that mistakes are not enemies. They are invitations. They invite humility, compassion, wisdom, and depth. They strip away arrogance. They dismantle illusions. They break the fragile mask of certainty. And in the ruins, something real begins to grow. Without them, he would never have known who he truly was. Without them, he would never have touched the ground of his own being. If these words already stir something in you, consider subscribing. Not for the sake of a channel, but as a way to keep returning to these reflections. Because in a noisy world, one sometimes needs a reminder that the cracks in our lives are not endings, they are beginnings. The shock of mistake. From the very beginning, he was taught that mistakes were dangerous. At school, they appeared in red ink, symbols of failure, scars on paper. At home, they brought disappointment, sometimes punishment. And so, a quiet fear was planted. To err is to fall short of love, of worth, of belonging. This fear followed him into adulthood. In work, he tried to appear flawless. In relationships, he tried to never stumble. He built his life like a fragile glass sculpture, desperate that nothing should ever crack. And yet, life has its own rhythm. No matter how careful, no matter how controlled, the cracks eventually came. The first mistake always arrives as a shock. It feels like an earthquake beneath the ground he thought was steady. The story he tells himself, I am capable, I am strong, I am in control, suddenly shatters. And in that shattering, there is terror. He feels small, exposed, weak. But if he stays with that shock long enough, a strange realization appears. The mistake does not kill him. It does not erase him. It unsettles him, yes, but it also wakes him up. The truth is unsettling. Perfection is a cage, a prison built from the fear of being seen as less than whole. And mistakes are the cracks that break the walls. They are jolts that remind him life is not a straight line. Life is a dance of missteps and recoveries, of losses and discoveries. Still, in the beginning, mistakes feel like violence. The ego screams, this should not have happened. The heart aches with shame. The mind rewinds the moment again and again, searching for escape. Yet the deeper he looks, the more he sees. The shock of mistake is also the shock of awakening. It is the first tear in the veil of certainty. It is the moment he learns, perhaps against his will, that he is not as solid, not as permanent, not as untouchable as he believed. And though this realization hurts, it also liberates. For if he can survive being wrong, if he can survive imperfection, then maybe mistakes are not his enemy. Maybe they are the raw material of growth, the paradox of consciousness. He begins to notice something strange. Every mistake, though painful, carries within it a hidden light. At first he resists, he denies. He tries to erase what happened. But in time, he realizes, without the mistake, there would be no awareness of what he truly values. The paradox is clear. Consciousness is not born from certainty, but from error. One cannot know strength without weakness. One cannot know wisdom without ignorance. And he cannot know what is true until he has stumbled into what is false. It is the contrast that awakens him. When he falls, he sees where the ground lies. When he fails, he discovers what cannot be relied upon. When he feels the sting of shame, he learns the cost of living only for appearances. The mistake in this way is not merely a flaw, it is a mirror. It reflects back to him the gap between who he thinks he is and who he actually is. It reveals the distance between the mask he wears and the self that struggles behind it. And here lies the paradox. He spends his life trying to be right, yet it is wrongness that gives birth to clarity. He wants only success, yet it is failure that deepens his soul. He clings to order, yet it is chaos that shakes him awake. This is not comfortable. No one enjoys discovering their own illusions. But without the disillusionment, he would remain asleep, drifting through life in a haze of borrowed beliefs and secondhand truths. He sees now that mistakes are sacred interruptions. They break the trance. They force him to question what he never thought to question. They remind him that growth is not a straight ascent, but a series of spirals, collapses, and rebirths. In this way, mistakes are not the opposite of wisdom. They are the very soil from which wisdom grows. Just as a seed must split apart before it can rise into light, so too must the human being break apart before true consciousness can bloom. He begins to understand. The paradox of consciousness is that only through darkness can he know light, and only through mistakes can he begin to awaken. The hidden teacher. Slowly, he begins to recognize a pattern. Every mistake that once felt like a curse now reveals itself as a teacher, not a gentle one, not a soft one, but a teacher that leaves marks on the soul. This teacher does not speak in words. It teaches through consequence, through silence, through the echo of choices that cannot be undone. He notices how the pain of failure lingers longer than the glow of success. A victory fades quickly into memory, but a mistake whispers for years. It stays alive, asking again and again, will you ignore me or will you learn? In this way, mistakes are more faithful than triumphs. Triumphs flatter. Mistakes transform. At first, he tried to resist their lessons. He drowned them in distraction, buried them in denial, polished over them with excuses, but still, they waited for him. Because mistakes are patient. They do not leave until their teaching has been absorbed. And what do they teach? Humility, above all. The humility of knowing he is not untouchable. The humility of seeing that he too is fragile, limited, and unfinished. They also teach compassion. For once he has felt the weight of his own errors, he can no longer condemn others so quickly. He recognizes in their failures the same struggle he carries in himself. He sees that every human being is stumbling through existence, making sense of the unknown, learning as they fall. And finally, they teach depth, for no book, no lecture, no wisdom passed from another can replace the lesson that comes from living one's own mistake. Only in falling can he understand what it means to rise. Only in breaking can he know what it means to be whole. The hidden teacher is relentless, but it is also honest. It does not flatter the ego. It does not comfort the mind. It strips away illusions until nothing remains but truth. And though he once hated his mistakes, he now bows to them in silence, because he sees clearly. Without their guidance, he would still be lost in the dream of perfection, the surrender. At a certain point, he realizes that fighting against mistakes is exhausting. He has spent years trying to hide them, erase them, rewrite them. He has carried the heavy armor of perfection, hoping no one would notice the cracks. But the armor grows heavier, and the cracks only widen. And so, something unexpected happens. He stops resisting. He surrenders. This surrender is not defeat. It is not resignation. It is a quiet acceptance, a whispered acknowledgement. Yes, I am flawed. Yes, I will fail again. Yes, I am unfinished. At first, this acceptance feels like weakness, but slowly he discovers it is strength, because when he no longer fears mistakes, he becomes free, free to try, free to risk, free to live without the suffocating weight of constant self-judgment. Surrender changes the way he sees himself. He no longer defines his worth by whether he succeeds or fails. He begins to see himself as a process, not a product. A river, not a stone. Always moving, always reshaping, always incomplete. This shift is profound. Where once he asked, "How can I avoid mistakes?" he now asks, "What can I learn from them?" The question opens a new path, a path not of fear, but of curiosity, not of control, but of trust. In surrender, he also learns forgiveness. Forgiveness for the younger self who didn't know better. Forgiveness for the choices made in confusion, in fear, in desperation. Forgiveness for being human, for being imperfect, for being alive. This forgiveness softens him. It dissolves the rigid edges of shame. It makes space for kindness toward himself, and from that kindness, kindness toward others. The surrender does not erase mistakes. They still happen. They always will. But now, each mistake is met with openness instead of panic. It is welcomed as a messenger instead of an enemy. And he begins to see that life was never about avoiding mistakes at all. It was about allowing them to shape him, to guide him, to carve him into someone more real. In surrender, he discovers peace. Not the peace of perfection, but the peace of no longer needing it. The invisible growth. He notices something subtle. Growth does not announce itself. It does not arrive with fanfare or applause. It happens quietly, in the shadows, where no one is watching. Every mistake leaves behind a residue, a lesson, a scar, a fragment of wisdom. And though he may not see it in the moment, over time, those fragments gather. They weave together into something stronger, something deeper than he imagined possible. Looking back, he remembers the moments he thought would break him. The failures that left him sleepless, the regrets that haunted him for years. At the time, they felt like endings, but now he sees them differently. They were beginnings. Each collapse created space for something new to emerge, a new perspective, a new humility, a new strength. This is the invisible nature of growth. It rarely feels like growth when it happens. It feels like loss, like confusion, like failure. But beneath the surface, the roots are spreading. The foundations are deepening. The soul is being prepared for a larger horizon. He begins to trust this hidden process. He understands that what feels like ruin today may reveal itself tomorrow as transformation. That what feels like failure in this season may be the very seed of wisdom in the next. And so, he learns to be patient, to give time for meaning to ripen, to give space for wounds to heal into wisdom. Invisible growth is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. It is about shedding illusions and stepping into authenticity. It is about no longer pretending to be untouched, but carrying one's scars as evidence of survival and as invitations to compassion. The mistakes that once felt like curses now appear as hidden blessings. They forced him to change, to adapt, to evolve. They stripped away arrogance and replaced it with depth. They burned away false identities and revealed something truer underneath. He sees clearly now. Without mistakes, there is no growth. Without wounds, there is no healing. Without failure, there is no awakening. And though the growth remains invisible to the eye, it is undeniable to the soul, the silence after the error. In the end, he looks back across the landscape of his life. He sees the peaks of success, the moments of joy, the seasons of comfort. But those are not the moments that shaped him most. What truly carved him into who he has become were the valleys, the falls, the missteps, the mistakes. He realizes now that there is no path without error. Mistakes are not detours. They are the road itself. Each one bends him, refines him, deepens him. Each one strips away a little more of the false self and reveals a little more of the truth within. The final gift of mistake is silence. For when the lesson has been learned, there is no need for regret, no need for endless self-punishment. Only the quiet knowing that nothing was wasted. Not a single failure, not a single regret. Every error was an invitation to wake up. He understands now that life is not about perfection. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness requires every fracture, every wound, every scar. He bows inwardly to his mistakes, not with bitterness, not with shame, but with gratitude. Because without them, he would never have grown. And perhaps this is what every soul must remember. That the errors we fear are not enemies, but companions. They walk beside us, sometimes painfully, but always faithfully, guiding us toward the person we were meant to become. So he surrenders once more to the rhythm of life. He no longer resists the cracks in his path. He no longer hides from the weight of imperfection. He steps forward in trust, knowing that even in failure, he is moving deeper into truth. If these reflections have stirred something in you, consider subscribing, not for the sake of numbers, but as a reminder to return to this stillness, to keep seeking the quiet wisdom hidden in the noise. And if these words touched you, share them. For there may be someone, somewhere, standing in the shadow of their own mistake who needs to hear that this too is not the end. Because mistakes are not the final word, they are the beginning.